Why hello no wait, not gonna finish that one. Anyway, thank you for clicking on the video today. I'm Nikki, I talk about animation, and today I want to talk about my favorite topic in the whole wide world, Helluva Boss. And more specifically, the ship that made the cold little rock located in the left side of my chest actually ship something. That's right, we're talking about Stolitz. As absolutely catastrophic as the relationship between Stolas and Blitz is at this point in the show, I just absolutely adore it. I especially love how the show is written because you can see exactly how these two ended up in the place that they did. How each of them made so many mistakes in regards to this relationship that neither one of them is entirely to blame, but neither one of them is innocent in any way. So now I am going to take both my boys to task. We're going to go through every single event for each of them that led to the relationship they ended up having, how each of them fell in love, and how they each ended up so brokenhearted. And I had to split this up into two videos because each of them deserve a deep dive, and we're gonna begin with Stolas because he is by far the easier one of the two to talk about, and each video will focus on each character's individual perspective. So if I say anything in this video that seems as if I am not taking Blitz's perspective into account, it's because it's not the most important thing for this video. I do not mean to be unfair to Blitz, but anything that's relevant to him will be in his video. So you don't need to come after me in the comments, but if you do, then thank you for commenting. And just for future references, at the time I'm making this video, Stolas' last appearance was in the episode Apology Tour. Also, fair warning, I am going to do my very best to refrain from coddling either one of them, because these are grown-ass adults. They are responsible for themselves and their actions. Neither one of them deserves to be babied. And every time I see someone's take where they blame one of them for everything and refuse to let the other one have any faults, it kind of ruins my enjoyment of them as characters. Because the best part of this ship is that you can look at both of these characters and think, you fucked up. And just a little plea here, some of the things I say in this video might sound a little far-fetched, but I beg you to please watch the video through before commenting or disliking or anything of that sort. So without further ado, let's talk about Stolas. Alright, so let us first establish Stolas as a character. We see from his childhood that Stolas grows up with the understanding that he is supposed to do certain things. He receives the grimoire and all of his duties, you have to do this and this and this, and when he explains to Blitz about the grimoire, he very specifically says, I'm supposed to. Even if he doesn't know if he can fulfill his duties, he's supposed to do them, so he just accepts them.
I'm supposed to learn to use it. To study the sky. Why? My dad says I can find prophecies, but I don't really know. But I'm supposed to.
This also leaves him without basic critical thinking skills, making him vulnerable to being manipulated. The other thing we see from his childhood is that Stolas grows up without having any specific social skills. Although I'm uncertain of whether this is because he was specifically isolated, because when Paimon mentions that he doesn't have any friends, it sounds to me more as if Paimon is saying that Stolas has trouble making friends.
My son doesn't have any friends, you see. It's his birthday. He's so sad.
And he's definitely a shy introvert because when he's an adult and we see him at parties, he has the presence of a lamp. He has trouble finding anyone to talk to, and he very clearly doesn't have the respect from his peers. I wonder if that's part of the reason why he was betrothed to Stella of all people, because we see that she has a big network and clearly does have social skills. It's a little funny to me that they have an arranged marriage because it doesn't seem as if all of the Goetia are in arranged marriages, like Andrelphus isn't. So it makes me wonder about the whole destined to sire a precautionary heir thing. If that's just because Stolas holds a very important position in the family and therefore he has to do things that maybe others don't. It's also clear that it's not that the Goetia family are inherently homophobic, because we know from the official Pride art that both Stolas, Vasago, and Andrelphus are all gay, and at Stella's not divorced party there is a couple who are clearly two males dancing. So Stolas and Stella are just fat out of luck that they had to get married despite Stolas' sexuality, and they seemingly weren't encouraged to divorce, and there weren't any measures in place in case their sexualities would be a problem in terms of a marriage to ensure that you could have a child via surrogate or rainbow family or something. But tangent aside, Stolas and Stella get married in order to produce a precautionary heir, which they do, and then they're just stuck in the hellscape of a loveless marriage. And this is where one of Stolas' biggest character flaws comes into play, which is his desire to put other people's needs before his own, specifically Octavia. So growing up, he learns that he has to suppress his emotions. He's not allowed to be excited for his birthday, he's not allowed to cry when he's upset.
Calm yourself, young prince. You know excitement is unbecoming of a geisha.
That's an ugly noise, son. Here, how about you cease this bitch crying?
And he clearly suppresses his anger and irritation with Stella's constant abuse, all because he wants Octavia to have a pleasant home life, and he hides the misery of their marriage so well for her that she just never noticed until she's 17 years old. And the misery of the marriage is only further compounded by Stolas' dream of true love, with his only outlet being fiction with romance and sexual plots. And based on Stolas' comments about him being a boring stiff and his lack of enthusiasm in the bedroom, Stolas is sleepwalking through life, eternal life. Unfortunately though, it is these years of suppressing his emotions that turns Stolas into a ticking time bomb who will need the smallest of provocations to go off and just fuck everything up. And that provocation comes perfectly on the day where Stella decides to throw an anniversary party with the not yet divorced theme, which she didn't intend on telling him about until he discovers it for himself. She gives him a backhanded invitation, and he has to listen to her badmouth him the entire party.
Can you imagine if you didn't have money?
So when his hellhound bodyguards present him with the adult version of the boy he fell for love at first sight breaking into his home, Stolas is too far gone to think clearly. Especially when Blitz proceeds to talk into Stolas' romantic fantasies about scaling the walls for him.
Yeah, well, I figured, since you're a prince and all, it might just be easier to scale the walls and slip on in.
Making him the easiest target for seduction ever. And just like that, his entire family situation blows up. He even admits that he didn't take the time to think about going to a motel.
It wasn't expected. I didn't have time to go to a motel.
And with all of the years of pent-up emotions, Stolas running on adrenaline decides he wants a divorce from Stella, only to then not be able to pull the trigger on it for months on end because he's come back down to earth and realized what he's done and that he isn't the type of person who can just go through with big decisions like that. And this leads to several months of pure misery for himself, Octavia, and Stella as they live in this terribly toxic household of constant fighting until Stella begins taking Octavia away to, I assume, her brother's house on the weekends. The most ironic part about their family is that Via manages to be more mature than both of her parents. Stella is a bratty child driven by want, and Stolas is only slightly more mature, being a dumb teenager running on hormones. And of course this makes perfect sense when you've never been encouraged to think for yourself, which is exactly why Via is the more mature of this family, because basically Stolas' best parenting technique was that he showered Octavia with unconditional love to the point she was allowed to become her own person. She had a childhood where she was an actual child. As a teenager, she has her own style. She dresses pretty casually and comfortably, whereas both of her parents dress formally. And she has her own interests and tastes.
Oh, can we go to Stylish Coles? They sell weird taxidermy there.
Of course, she is still a child, which is why I love the scene in Lululand so much, where Stolas can't bring himself to tell her the truth about his and Stella's marriage and how Via is the precautionary heir and why he's acting the way he is now. He knows not to burden his daughter with these harsh realities, even though he really needs someone to talk to about it. On the flip side though, Stolas has also realized that he deserves to be happy, which is a good thing, because everyone deserves to be happy. Unfortunately, he comes to look for happiness in the wrong place. Because once Stolas realizes that he actually has a very important grimoire which has been stolen, he remembers that he needs to get it back. And I recently realized how skewed the arrangement is in Blitz's favor. Seriously, Stolas asks for one night a month, and in exchange, Blitz, Luna, Millie, and Moxie all have access to the grimoire, which they don't have any particular reverence for keeping safe, leaving it in a safe that has the code 1234, using it as a coaster, not being entirely sure where it is when their office is set on fire. It is so easily stolen by Octavia, further proving their lack of security measures. And not to mention, when they go to the human world, only one of them, and that being the receptionist who doesn't actually usually go on missions, has a human disguise, making them so obvious that the agents of Dorks has caught on to them, and the people of Los Angeles are getting news that there are aliens among them. Not to mention, they also managed to antagonize a trio of cherubs. So Stolas holds his hand over an illegal business practice, all for one night a month. That even though you'd think that he would realize that he has all the power to make Blitz do whatever he wants, they somehow have an ironclad contract that means that Blitz can just refuse if he doesn't want to. Like, Stolas should literally be able to say, you're gonna be my bodyguard when I go to Lululand because I want you to, otherwise I am going to take back my book. But he doesn't. Blitz can just freely say, I don't want to have sex with you today because it's not in the contract.
Look, I just had a chemical peel, so you'll have to find someone else's face to plant that feathered ass.
And this led me to the conclusion that Stolas' self-sacrificial nature has led him to create this arrangement primarily so that he doesn't have to take the grimoire away from Blitz, who needs it. So he rationalizes that because Blitz was the one who seduced him, he is clearly attracted to him, and therefore one night of sex is not an issue. So with all of his pent-up sexual desires finally being able to be unleashed, Stolas enjoys the deal a whole lot to begin with. But because he has feelings for Blitz, the arrangement doesn't fulfill him enough, which is why he attempts to spend some time with Blitz in other settings, like hiring him to be his bodyguard at Lululand or inviting him to go to the Harvest Moon Festival so they can spend time together in other ways. Because with the arrangement as it is, Stolas cannot make Blitz do anything. He can't invite him on a date or something, because that runs the risk of Blitz feeling pressure from the grimoire arrangement. Basically, the best thing Stolas can do is to use the nights of the full moon to spend some time with Blitz that isn't necessarily sexual, which we can see that he does through the photos on his phone in the circus. Otherwise, all he has is his bumbling attempts at flirting, which seems to be that he assumes the things that are all right in the bedroom are also all right in public.
Why, hello, my big-dicked Blitzy.
Or it's simply that the only really positive interactions we can glean he has with Blitz are from the bedroom. Like the way Blitz is actually excited at the end of Truth Seekers, and also just based on Blitz's whole trunk with sex shit, they have gone through a lot of toys. And we also see that in the fragments from All To You, that there are scenes from their bedroom shenanigans where Blitz is smiling. So I assume that they've had a lot of fun in the bedroom, and that's basically what Stolas is holding on to, that they have at least had nice moments together. Otherwise, Blitz has really given nothing to Stolas to make him feel that there is any hope for them in a relationship. He's either showed no interest or specifically shown disinterest. And these little fragments from All To You reveals that the morning after was always really sad for Stolas because Blitz would leave and he would be all alone, which pairs perfectly well with him sitting home alone on a, I assume, Friday night, just eating cereal, watching telenovelas, while even his butler is out on the town. But since Stolas doesn't want to ruin Blitz's business model by taking back the grimoire, he is now stuck in this situationship, even though he has basically every reason to just end it. Like, there are at least 2 occasions where he could just end it out of professional reasons, that being when they get caught by the dorks, and then later when Octavia steals the grimoire. He could literally just say, I'm sorry, I don't trust you, I'm taking back my book now. But he doesn't, because that would ruin the business. Otherwise, he should obviously just have taken the grimoire back in the first place, because it's his property, and he acknowledges that if they get caught, it's also his ass on the line.
You know, if you get in trouble, I get in trouble.
Otherwise, the best argument overall is his own mental health which is why he should have just ended the deal after the events at Ozzy's when he realized he couldn't be in it anymore, or that Blitz couldn't be in it anymore, because it was a bad situation. But instead of just ending it, Stolas decides that he has to find a way to end it without screwing over Blitz. So he spends months waiting to be able to get the Asmodean crystal so Blitz can have it, while he sinks into a deeper and deeper depression. And he has no indication from Blitz that they will have a relationship after this. So he's about to give up the only thing that's making him happy, and all he can think about is Blitz's happiness in all of it. And if you think I'm reaching here, he pretty much confirms all of this in Apology Tour.
Why would I allow everyone to see how much I like you? How I've tried so fucking hard to spend time with you, to support you?
Luckily, Season 2 offers Stolas a lot of character development, specifically through 3 very important conversations that he has this season. The first one is with Stella at the end of the circus, and this one is probably the most important of the 3. This is the moment where Stolas finally puts his foot down to Stella and tells her he wants the divorce they've been putting off for too long. And finally he realizes that their marriage was primarily a failure because Stella was never going to be happy. He could try, and he apparently did try, everything to make their marriage tolerable for both of them, to make her happy or happy-ish, but he was never going to succeed with that. And luckily he realizes that it's not because of him, it's because Stella just wants to be miserable.
I tried so many years to make it comfortable for us, to have this family, but it was never enough.
There was nothing he could do for her. Most likely her misery was Stella's coping mechanism for this marriage she didn't want. As much as I love and sympathize with Stolas, I do feel like Stella actually got screwed worse with the marriage, because whereas Stolas has duties and a title and a position that's important, Stella was basically bred to be a wife. Her design makes her look like a bride. Her entire identity is that she had to get married and she had to pop out one egg, and then she was just done. Then she has to spend all of eternity as the arm candy of an introverted twink. This was never going to be a happy marriage for either of them, but Stella was seemingly never encouraged to be anything more than the wife and the mother. And so far we haven't seen her put any effort into being a mother. She hasn't had an on-screen interaction with Octavia yet, although the fact that Octavia goes with her on the weekends and seems to be spending a lot of her time with Stella, I don't think their relationship is necessarily terrible, but we'll see. After this conversation, we also see that Stolas' attitude towards Stella has changed moving forward. He isn't gonna take any shit from her anymore, so he actively stands up to her or even flat out insults her in both Seeing Stars and Western Energy.
Your mother's being a real bitch. Well, how was I supposed to know you can spell? I've never seen you read.
He is completely done with her, he just wants her gone, and he isn't gonna put up with any shit from her ever again. I really like Stella's character, and I think it's mostly because she's like chaotically fun, even when she's being an outright bitch, but it's also what just makes the moments where Stolas stands up to her so much more cathartic, and I really missed having villains who were just terrible because they were terrible.
Up yours!
Stella, for fuck's sake, stop making this harder to bullshit.
But he also carries this attitude with him in regards to his relationship with Blitz, as seen at the beginning of Apology Tour, where he is completely no nonsense. Why are you here, Blitz? What do you want from me? And when the answers to those questions isn't what Stolas wants in his life anymore, he's not afraid to just tell Blitz to fuck off. The next important conversation is with Stryker in Western Energy. This is not so much a conversation as it's the villain's monologue when Stryker takes the opportunity to tell Stolas off for the privileges of the royal family.
Not every ring is some fancy-ass city with some fancy-ass mansion that only fancy-ass royals get to live in.
He relishes in the opportunity to torture a blue blood, and though he's vague about the details of his background, he tells Stolas that a royal has done something terrible to him personally.
Some of us have hard lives to live, and some of us have everything we care about taken away by fuckers like you.
But because Stolas doesn't see his royal status as a thing that's necessarily good, he doesn't view it as a privilege but more of a burden, because he wasn't encouraged to be the person he wanted to be or do the things he wanted to do. He had to do as he was told. So he doesn't consider the privileges that Stryker mentions to him as outweighing the negative.
I have no...
Which is why the importance of this encounter is in fact not that Stolas gets any character growth, it's the fact that he gets a massive amount of trauma out of it. First of all, he now has this voice in his head of Stryker telling him that he is a bad person because of what he is. But once Eminem have brought him to the hospital, we get a glimpse of how lonely Stolas' existence truly is. Because while the hospital staff and the press are very on alert upon his arrival, Blitz is seemingly the only person who reaches out to him once he's hospitalized. He reacts immediately upon his phone vibrating. There is no other messages or calls or anything. And though his room is filled with flowers, they are all the same and there are no cards on them. So it just looks as if the hospital staff has filled the room for his comfort. And then in Oops, when he goes to talk to Asmodeus, it's the next week. And though Ozzy asks him how he's been, like courtesy-wise, it's not, "You were just in the hospital, are you okay?" It's,
"Still getting your kink on with that feisty imp?"
Clearly, Stolas recovered from his injuries really quickly, as he's able to get out of the hospital and walk around just fine. But we can see in the full moon that he still has the bandage on his arm from where he was stabbed, so he at least still has one wound on his body. And then it's in this same episode where he can see on the video Crimson sends to Ozzy that Stryker is involved in the kidnapping of Fizzarolli, so he knows full well that his torturer is loose and is still hurting people. But he just ignores that, he doesn't mention it to Ozzy, and then he spends the whole day helping Ozzy deal with the lawyer. But another thing about this altercation with Stryker is that I feel like it points towards how I think season 2 is going to end, and that is with Stolas abandoning his royal position. It also relates to his argument with Stella. Basically, I feel like Stolas is getting fed up with what being part of the Goetia family has meant for him, both in terms of his arranged marriage and his lack of control over his own destiny. Also, there are people out there in the world who actively hate him just for existing.
All you royals ever do is try to talk over us.
But mostly it's because of his relationship with Via and how that has changed since Blitz. There is this contrast between Lululand and Seeing Stars, because in Lululand, Stolas clearly prioritizes Octavia over Blitz. He hires Blitz to be his bodyguard so he can flirt with him all day, but he is mostly focused on spending time with Octavia. So when she runs away, he chases after her, and at the end when he carries her out of the park, which is now on fire, and they're standing in the parking lot, and the IMP gang come flying out of the park because of an explosion, Blitz is lying there on the ground, clearly injured, and Stolas doesn't bat one of his 4 eyes at this. But then flash forward to Seeing Stars, and once they find Via and Luna kicks Blitz in the crotch, Stolas hesitates on whether he should run to Via or if he should comfort Blitz. And of course he chooses Via, but his hesitation indicates that she is no longer the absolute most important person in his world. She has to share that position. So I feel like the story is pointing towards that Stolas will have to make a symbolic choice between Via and Blitz, where if Emberlyn is correct about a mysterious demon standing up to Satan, that could very well be Stolas, faced with the choice between keeping the life he's always known, the money, the palace, the privileges, with the caveat that he has to make a public apology and renew his vows to Stella, or lose everything but absolute freedom. I feel like he would be so fed up at this point that he would choose the freedom, regardless of whether or not he had any kind of safety net other than Blitz's willingness to support him.
And the only thing the Goetia family wanted from our marriage is already 17, so it's over. I'm done.
It would also fit with him becoming the new receptionist for IMP because Luna wants to do more field work, and they've already had the talk about her not being a particularly good receptionist, and also just because he could play lawyer for Ozzy because he can read fast. And then seeing the world from Blitz's perspective, Stolas will realize the privileges he has had in his life, and it would provide a lot of interesting situations for them as a couple to work through with their relationship, and then it would be very satisfying if in the end they get all the riches back. Although it would be really sad that such a storyline would come at the expense of Stolas' relationship to Via. I'm just really looking forward to him having some more interactions with characters who are not Blitz. And Stolas also just has a lot of growing up to do. He needs to be more responsible for himself, he needs to make some friends, have some adventures, go to some parties, live a little. Ultimately, he needs to be a little bit selfish and get to know himself before he can be happy and ultimately be a good parent again. And they're immortal, so it's worth getting out of the way now. I apologize for getting sidetracked here. We have to move on to important conversation number 3, which is with Asmodeus in Oops. This one is very brief, but very effective. It's basically Ozzy reminding Stolas about the importance of consent. At this point in the story, this is luckily something that Stolas has already realized for himself. Back in Ozzy's, he began checking his behavior towards Blitz. He stopped calling him Blitzy, he stopped hitting on him.
Oh,
Blitz.
And he was really affected by what Blitz said to him at the end about how he had made their relationship exclusively sexual. But the thing that's most noteworthy about this interaction with Asmodeus actually refers back to the episode Aussies, because during the iconic House of Asmodeus sequence, Asmodeus calls Stolas out for his affair with Blitz and how that has impacted his family.
You sold your life for a thrust!
And Stolas is ashamed of this, so he hides his face in the menu. He's ashamed of what he's done to his family, he isn't ashamed of Blitz, but he still fails to stand up for him when he needs him to. So the fact that the immediate aftermath of that whole mess is Stolas deciding to go and ask Ozzy for an Asmodean crystal to give to Blitz. He's literally just been publicly humiliated by this guy, and he just decides to go and ask him for a massive favor, which he pretty much owes him, so. And then here, he just walks right into Ozzy's palace and actually admits to him that he has feelings for Blitz.
I, seem to have found myself with feelings for him.
This also makes Ozzy the first person he admits these feelings to. It's also noteworthy that Ozzy suspects he's looking for a love potion, but Stolas flat out rejects that idea. So even though he really wants Blitz to love him, he doesn't want to use some kind of magical element to create an illusion of love.
No, never that.
This episode also once again demonstrates how Stolas will go above and beyond for other people's needs, as he spends the entire day helping Ozzy with this lawyer, even after Ozzy has told him that he won't give him an Asmodean crystal. So unless he thought that helping him might get him one, he just spends the entire day doing something for someone who doesn't really appreciate his presence.
I was stuck with Stolas the whole time.
And it's so sweet when in the end, he's so happy for Ozzy and Fizz that they've been reunited that he just leaves quietly so they can recover from the ordeal. Alright, now I've done all of the setup involving other characters, so it is finally time to talk about the Blitz of it all. So strap in, cause this ride is kind of all over the place. So it's fair to say that in the first season, Stolas' character was not fully realized when they began writing the show, so he sometimes seems a little bit off from what I think his final characterization is really supposed to be. He's supposed to be a sweet and well-meaning character who does things with the best of intentions, but they don't turn out the way they're supposed to. But in his first canonical appearance in Murder Family, he seems to be a lot more menacing than he actually is for the remainder of the show. It kind of looks as if he is intentionally manipulating Blitz into agreeing to the arrangement, which doesn't really fit with his character later on, as he doesn't seem like someone who even knows how to manipulate people. But on the other hand, this sort of fits with how his characterization in the first season seems kind of confused. As we can see in the circus, the crush he had on Blitz as a child reignites immediately upon seeing him again as an adult. And because Stolas is swept up in this whole romance of a narrative that Blitz is spinning for him about scaling the walls and all that, he falls for the idea that Blitz has romantic intentions towards him, but then that turns into Blitz seducing him and they end up having sex instead. So in that way, Stolas' feelings become conflicted between love and lust, especially because he looks towards Blitz as sort of a guiding light. So if Blitz turns romance into sex, then that must be what Blitz is interested in. At the end of the day, Stolas wants Blitz, so he's going to do what he thinks Blitz wants to do in order to get him. And with this mindset, the arrangement makes perfect sense from Stolas' perspective, because this way, Blitz gets to keep the grimoire, which is crucial, because if Stolas took that away from him, then there definitely would not be a chance for him to get with Blitz. And he then uses the arrangement to continue doing the other thing he thought Blitz wanted from him. So make no mistake, the arrangement is definitely self-serving for Stolas, but he is also the one who gets the least out of it and the one who is the most trapped by it.
All I can see is how wrong it is to be so tethered to someone in such an unfair way and not know how they feel.
The arrangement itself is emblematic of Stolas and Blitz's relationship as a whole, wherein it requires relatively little on Blitz's part for Stolas to have hope of a romantic relationship between them. Stolas will do anything for Blitz, whether that is putting his own neck on the line so IMP can run as Blitz wants it to, or turn into a super demon to punish the dorks for threatening Blitz. But in return, Blitz gives him almost nothing to work with. Like, Stolas is trying to court Blitz despite the fact that he knows that Blitz's primary goal in seducing him originally was to steal the grimoire. Blitz is actively rude and dismissive towards him, and he very seldom reaches out to Stolas for any reason. And though Stolas is willing to ignore this, he does still notice and he still feels it. Which is why in those rare moments where Blitz does reach out to him, it comes to mean so much, but then it's always severely undermined afterwards. And he puts up with a lot from Blitz and always ends up being the one who takes most of the emotional burden onto himself. And nowhere is this more true than in Ozzy's. From Stolas' perspective, this night has to be really confusing. He has settled on the reality that Blitz doesn't reciprocate his feelings.
Why won't you love me, Alejandro?
That's a mood, Gabriella.
But then suddenly, Blitz calls him, invites him on a date, and Stolas is super excited. Then when he shows up to this date, which Blitz has invited him on, Blitz's first reaction is to criticize his outfit, which is a perfectly fine date outfit. It's literally just Stolas' usual outfit with a change of color scheme and then a jabot and a starry cape. And he isn't even wearing his hat with the crown on, but I will talk more about this in the Blitz video. Then once they get inside, Blitz just ignores him and pulls out a pair of binoculars and looks in the complete opposite direction from Stolas. Then once Vivziepop gets on stage, both Stolas and Blitz are nervous about being recognized, so they try to duck. But then during the whole House of Asmodeus sequence, Blitz suddenly decides to call attention to himself by standing up to defend Moxie and says some really weird things you don't want to hear from your date, which then gets him roasted by Vivziepop, Rosica, and Asmodeus, only for the attention to shift to Stolas because he is on a date with Blitz. I honestly don't think Ozzy really cares about Stolas cheating on Stella, so this whole thing is really just about him being here with Blitz of all people. Then, once the number is over and Stolas recognizes that Blitz is upset and tries to comfort him, Blitz pulls his hand back, calls their date a mistake and insists they should leave, and then once he drops Stolas off at home, he is completely cold and then just says that their relationship is only sexual because that's what Stolas wanted. And he is so upset his voice breaks and he's on the brink of crying.
Don't act like what we have is anything but you wanting me to fuck you, okay? You make that really clear all the time.
When you really think about it, Stolas actually has the most right to be angry about this disaster date, but he ends up taking all of the blame for it. And we can see from his text in Western Energy that he sent Blitz a text later that evening trying to apologize, which Blitz just sort of brushes off. And then Stolas asks if they can talk about what happened next time Blitz comes over, and Blitz then questions why that's even relevant, which then causes Stolas to digress and then becoming more apologetic about even suggesting that there was anything wrong in the first place. And then he proceeds to get blackout drunk on absinthe, and then comes to the conclusion that Blitz was never happy in their relationship, which makes a lot of sense because he has no real evidence to the contrary. And then instead of just ending the deal right there and then, he sets out on a months-long quest to get Blitz an Asmodean crystal, which considering Stolas as a character makes a lot of sense, because if Blitz is refusing to talk about what happened at Ozzy's, it's not like Stolas can really say, you know what, this arrangement was a bad idea, you can borrow my grimoire until we can get you an Asmodean crystal, and then you'll never have to see me again? I mean, he could say that, but he wouldn't, because it would kind of be a false promise to make if he couldn't deliver. This whole disaster date aftermath is also the root of Stolas' depression, which is what really sabotages him in the full moon. When Blitz accuses him of making their entire relationship sexual, Stolas feels really guilty because he obviously wanted more from Blitz and he tried to show him. So he shifts gears into making their arrangement about what Blitz wants, which is why he lets them off the hook for the arrangement for several months with the "you don't have to come over unless you want to," where of course he hopes that Blitz will want to come over. But every time Blitz doesn't come over, it adds to the realization that the relationship really was primarily in Stolas' head. As he sings, "They are a comfortable lie." But the problem with this is that Blitz is now being graded on a test he has no idea he is even taking. And Stolas isn't really aware he's actually giving it. And then of course Stolas' general everyday officially changes when Stella moves out and the divorce proceedings officially begin. He has to learn how to live alone, which is a challenge that he acknowledges in the full moon.
I swore I wouldn't dwell on the divorce.
Even though he never loved Stella, and to a certain degree he even hates her, she was still there. She was still a part of his everyday for like 18 years. And in all of these months there's this hot and cold game with Blitz where they spend an entire day together in Los Angeles Angeles, and they're clearly bonding, and Blitz comforts Stolas, Stolas encourages Blitz, Blitz smiles at him, and then of course when he catches him by the wrist when he falls over, they run through the streets of Los Angeles holding hands. Seeing Stars really is just a shipping episode. But then we can also see from the text messages that after they got home, Stolas texted Blitz to thank him for helping him finding Via, and Blitz's response is no prob. And the whole Striker kidnapping Stolas just also removes any points Blitz might have earned, because not only is he dismissive of Stolas' plight when talking on the phone—
oh, for fuck's sake, can't you just get away? Aren't you powerful?
He doesn't reassure him that he will try and help him, but Stolas spent the whole kidnapping holding on to this idea that Blitz will come and save him, and he uses the idea of Blitz to keep himself calm and to throw Striker off when he's torturing him. But even though he really wants to believe that Blitz will come and save him, he's not sure that he actually will. But then of course turns out that he doesn't come to save him, even though he did send Eminem, and then the best he can muster afterwards is to send Stolas a text message and then not answer him when invited to visit in the hospital. And truthfully, Stolas is being very vague towards Blitz. He's afraid of rocking the boat in any way because he doesn't want to spook Blitz and he doesn't want to make any demands of him. So he tries to turn the big responsibility of taking their relationship further over to Blitz, but Blitz doesn't return any of the little things Stolas tries to do, like calling him on the phone or commenting on his photos. And all these things stack up in time for the full moon, where Stolas is going to present Blitz with the Asmodean crystal. And I know that a lot of people have talked about how this whole thing would have gone better if Stolas had just invited Blitz over on another night, but this ties into Stolas' fear of inconveniencing Blitz. He's not going to invite him over on another occasion, because that goes outside of the deal which he feels so locked into. So he has to use the full moon where Blitz is going to come over no matter what, because that is still an inconvenience, but it's less of an inconvenience. But just to be clear, the full moon was never going to go well. And that is because of one very simple fact, illustrated perfectly in the music video for Just Look My Way. Stolas wants Blitz to say yes, but he expects him to say no. He sings this whole song about wanting Blitz to look his way and acknowledge his feelings for him, but he actually pushes away the moon, which represents Blitz, and it grows bigger and flies further and further away from him until he can't catch up to it anymore. And because he is so convinced that Blitz is going to tell him no, Stolas subconsciously begins to process his emotions in regards to this no he hasn't received yet. He's fully preparing himself for presenting Blitz with the crystal and Blitz's answer being, "Wow, thank you, I don't love you, goodbye." And in his mind, there is no room for nuance. There's no room in his mind for Blitz to say, "Wow, I didn't know you felt this way. Would you give me some time to think this over?" It's just a clear-cut yes or no answer. Do you want to be with me? Yes or no. Effectively, his whole mission of acquiring the Asmodean crystal for Blitz has turned him blind to the possibility that maybe Blitz has some complicated feelings in this whole matter that aren't going to be solved by a crystal. Especially because he bases this whole thesis on the night of Aussies, which is now several months ago, where he hasn't seen Blitz on a regular basis or had the opportunity to really talk to him about their situationship. He assumes that Blitz is upset about their arrangement and figures that ending it will automatically solve everything, which is why he is initially optimistic in the "When I See Him Tonight" song.
No need for an arrangement, it can just be him and me, I'll set us free. How perfect it could be.
Because he assumes that the arrangement is the problem, but gradually as he thinks more about it, he has to come to terms with the possibility that maybe the arrangement isn't the actual problem. Although, as I've also said, Stolas is the one who's the most trapped in the arrangement, so it would also just be a great relief for him to end it. Alright, so onto the night itself. We can see that before Blitz shows up, Stolas is trying to keep himself calm, twiddling with his fingers and rocking back and forth with his foot, and he already looks sad, as if Blitz has already told him no. And I'm going with, he definitely had his speech prepared for this evening. But then the massive curveball of the night hits. Because with all these months of Blitz showing absolutely no interest in coming over when it was his choice, Stolas is fully expecting the Blitz to show up to not be particularly interested in seeing him again. He's expecting this guy.
When this happens, it's not really something I fuss about.
And instead he gets this guy.
Heidi ha hoo ha, Stolas!
This cute, flirty little Blitz dressed all dapper with a big smile on his face and a sack full of sex toys like a perverted little Santa Claus. And he just keeps talking and is super eager to show off all the things he's brought, which could be the usual MO, but considering the entire arrangement is necessary because Stolas has to use the grimoire for his monthly duties, it stands to reason that he would use the grimoire before any shenanigans happen. So now he has to go off script, ask directly for the grimoire, and then everything just goes downhill from here. Because now he has to focus on keeping his head cool, get the grimoire away from Blitz, and dodge Blitz's attempt at seducing him, which is truly a feat. But this is where Stolas' problem with not wanting to inconvenience Blitz really kicks in, because he doesn't talk to Blitz about why exactly he wants to end the arrangement. He's just so laser focused on putting the grimoire back on its shelf and presenting Blitz with the Asmodean crystal so he can end the deal that way. As he neglects to pay attention to how Blitz is reacting to what's happening, there are actual tears in his eyes as he's pleading to keep the grimoire. And this is kind of ironic because Stolas seemingly is aware that Blitz has some issues that he doesn't really know how to deal with. And Stolas even wants to help with those issues. And then when Blitz expresses confusion at receiving the crystal and straight up begs to continue their sexual relationship, Stolas just completely overhears this bit and goes into his rehearsed speech, which doesn't explain anything other than how he's realized that their arrangement was wrong, but not all the steps that led him to that conclusion or how he believes that that's what Blitz wanted. And like, the speech is good and he's doing right by Blitz technically, and that gentle smile he has on his face when he attaches the crystal to Blitz's glove, it's so sweet. He's just proud of himself for actually doing the right thing. I don't exactly agree that this is some kind of grand romantic gesture as I've heard other people call it. It's romantic, yes, but it's one of those things where Stolas is too good to just leave Blitz high and dry with no means of getting to the living world after they've had their transactional relationship. It was also relatively easy for him to just ask Ozzy for a crystal. The most labor he had to do was the waiting. But then this sweet little moment is hit with a second curveball when Blitz misunderstands the situation and believes it's kinky roleplay. And he's totally into it and says the exact words that Stolas would want to hear from him, except in the wrong tone.
Oh, Stolas, I'll stay with you. I love you so much.
Which is the absolute antithesis of what Stolas expected Blitz's reaction to be to all of this. After the events of Ozzy's, where Blitz flat out said that the whole sexual relationship was Stolas' idea and Blitz seemed very upset about it, the fact that Blitz now turns the sweet little moment into the exact thing he berated Stolas for previously wanting from him, it's just heartbreaking. And it's this total whiplash that causes Stolas to shut down and immediately begin processing his emotions as if he's just received a no, except this is a lot worse. Because one thing he didn't count on was Blitz not recognizing his emotions as being real. He could handle a no, because a no would still recognize the way that he feels. He has spent months agonizing over this arrangement he put Blitz and himself into, so convinced that Blitz absolutely hated it, only to be confronted with the reality that it wasn't actually that big of a deal for Blitz. Now, I know that a lot of people think Stolas is a hypocrite for being upset with Blitz always thinking that everything is about sex, but I have to take him in a little bit of defense here and say I don't really think he is a hypocrite. He made attempts, vague as they were, to spend time with Blitz or to let him know that he cared about him, and there are also several instances of Blitz assuming that he just wants sex from him.
Look, I just had a chemical peel, so you'll have to find someone else's face to plant that feathered ass. Now remember, this is work and work only. Me and my crew are not here to satisfy your perverted bird needs, all right? If you try fucking my little ass in that park, I swear to you. If you promise this isn't some fuckfest invite, I'm not fucking you tonight, okay?
So I absolutely get where he's coming from, especially thinking back to Ozzy's when he wanted to comfort Blitz by inviting him inside, and Blitz just shut him down, unwilling to believe that he just wanted to spend a quiet evening with him. but I can't exactly defend him for just walking away from Blitz and refusing to have a conversation with him when Blitz clearly expressed confusion. And Stolas knows Blitz is following him, which is why he keeps talking to him, so he should really know that this isn't over. Also, he was the one who wanted to have a conversation in the first place, and now Blitz wants to have that conversation they really need to have. Stolas is just so convinced he is an unlovable monster that there is no hope, so this conversation would lead to nothing. Although once Blitz starts yelling, I get why Stolas shuts down, because he was technically just expressing that he was sad that Blitz couldn't take him seriously, and then Blitz immediately begins yelling at him and goes all in on him being a royal, which reminds him of everything Stryker said to him. And obviously no one is ever obligated to take abuse, so Stolas doesn't have to accept Blitz just yelling at him. And seeing as they are in Stolas' home, he is well within his right to make Blitz leave. Heartbreaking as it is that Stolas just gives up on Blitz immediately, I do kind of appreciate it. I've seen a lot of fan art that was made prior to the full moon, where people imagined Stolas' confession and that Blitz would reject him, and that Stolas would then try to fight for their relationship, and it just doesn't really seem that romantic to me. Mostly because the only way for him to fight for their relationship is to fight Blitz for their relationship. As much as he wants to have an actual relationship with Blitz, he requires Blitz putting in some effort to make it a relationship, and I am totally on board with that. I was pondering where exactly Stolas' feelings for Blitz came from, but when I really think about it, I don't think it's that weird that he's in love with Blitz. This also relates to Stolas' understanding of imps in general, because he knows from a cultural standpoint that he is above them.
You'll hire me?
But he really admires Blitz because of this one thing that Blitz as an imp has that Stolas as a Goetia doesn't, and that is the freedom to be who he wants to be. When they were kids, Stolas was fully aware that he was supposed to do certain things when he grew up, but Blitz expressed all these dreams he had that he knew he could do whatever he wanted. He just had to work hard enough for it. And Stolas is encouraging, but he doesn't really believe it. But then when they meet as adults, and Stolas asks Blitz if he's still a circus clown, as in, I'm doing this thing that I was supposed to do from childhood, are you doing the same? But then Blitz reveals that not only is he not a circus clown anymore, he is not even in a circus anymore. Now he's an assassin and he actually has his own business. So he both managed to accomplish his childhood dream, but he also evolved to have a new dream. And this is really attractive to Stolas, which is also why he's really hurt at Blitz's accusation that he looks down on him, because that is the exact opposite of what he feels towards Blitz. He looks up to him. Blitz inspires Stolas to just break the mold, go in the complete opposite direction, do something that no one in the Goetia family has done before him.
Goetia has never behaved like this before.
Because he was never encouraged to think for himself, and now Blitz has inspired him to want to think for himself, to want to decide what's best for him and what he needs.
You taught me that I could choose.
And the other thing about Blitz specifically that I can understand why Stolas is attracted to is that Blitz is quite exceptional. It's not just a physical thing where Blitz is able to look really adorable when he wants to, and of course that he is ripped, but Blitz is also confident, he's bombastic, he's outgoing and adventurous, he's athletic, he is a great problem solver and amazing leader, he is great at his job, he's protective and caring of the people he loves, and is a great father. All things that are attractive to people in general, which explains the general riz Blitz has. But to Stolas personally, it's also that they have great chemistry, and Stolas also just finds Blitz funny, and just based on their sex life, they also complement each other very well. So it's not that weird to me that Stolas would fall in love with Blitz, because Blitz does have a lot of good qualities. But Stolas is still blind to what being an imp actually means for Blitz, and he considers Blitz to be somewhat better than other imps.
Where is Blitz? He's my knight in shining armor, not you littler ones.
I will say that Stolas was the one who messed up the most in the full moon. There were a lot of things he could have done differently. He could have prepared himself better for the possibility that Blitz was gonna say something other than no. He could have also attempted to prepare Blitz for this conversation. And he definitely could have been more assertive in the lead up to this moment to make sure that they actually had a conversation about what happened at Aussie's, because he definitely really needed that. But as far as apology tour goes, that one is definitely on Blitz. I definitely understand Stolas' emotional state in the beginning of the episode. He has just had the absolute worst night of his life, and if he had gotten any sleep at all, he would have woken up to a barrage of memes. the absolute bare minimum that Blitz could never muster before the full moon, and now it comes off as if he is just dismissing Stolas' feelings, which paired with the event of the previous night doesn't exactly scream boyfriend material. Especially when Blitz then decides to invite himself over, dismiss the events of last night as just a rough night, and then just straight up ignores the fact that he is wearing his literal means of getting to the human world on his wrist, and insisting they should continue their transactional relationship for his ego.
I want to feel like I'm earning my way to Earth. Okay, so get your tight feathered ass out of that lawn chair and into the bedroom so I can fuck it.
If there is one thing where I feel Stolas is kind of guilty here, it's that he doesn't take the time to consider that Blitz's feelings in this situation are new to him, whereas Stolas himself was already beginning to process what happened. But considering how emotional things got in the full moon, I understand why Stolas is just trying to calm himself down. Like, maybe he would be willing to have a conversation with Blitz in a couple of days, but right now it's just too close. Especially considering that he literally just received a party invitation from a complete stranger to a party dedicated to hating on Blitz, which would then make him painfully aware that his situation with Blitz is not unique. Not to mention, if Stolas recognizes the name on the invitation, he most likely remembers that Vorosica was the one who referred to Blitz as a reckless, heartbreaking freak, which is not exactly what you want to hear about the person you want to be dating. I also feel compelled to address another thing about the scene, and it's when Stolas tells Blitz to stop talking sexual to him. This is another thing where people call Stolas a hypocrite because he used to hit on Blitz excessively in the first season. But I do think that we need to address the very important thing about this, and it's that no matter what Stolas said to Blitz in previous episodes, the fact that he here tells him that he is uncomfortable with the way he's talking to him, there is no room for argument here. Blitz should just stop.
I'm uncomfortable with how you're speaking to me now.
Like, two wrongs don't make a right. And I also think that the way Blitz is acting here is a lot worse than anything Stolas previously did. Like, if you compare the way Blitz acts here to how Stolas acted in something like Lululand, there is a clear difference. Like, Stolas just called Blitz cute and ran a little finger over him, but that was about it. And Blitz was accusing him of wanting to have sex with him in the amusement park, which never happened. Also, they were technically having sex at this point, and also, Blitz doesn't have to be right next to Stolas in Lululand. He chooses to be right up close to him and talk to him. Whereas here, Blitz is being a lot more aggressive. He was kicked out of this palace the previous night, then he comes over uninvited. He continuously pushes away the book, which is Stolas' symbolic shield for coping with the whole thing. Blitz forces himself into Stolas' face, uses his body to trap Stolas in the lawn chair. He tries to obstruct his path when he's walking away. He keeps yelling. He disregards Stolas' feelings. He makes lewd hand gestures and accuses Stolas of actually being turned on by this situation.
Oh, come on, Stolas. You can't tell me this isn't a fantasy of yours.
And then the pièce de résistance is when he pulls at Stolas' clothes. The look on Stolas' face here, he looks almost frightened that Blitz might actually try to do something more aggressive. I think it's also worth noting that Blitz at no point points out that Stolas ever behaved any way similar to him previously, and you're always allowed to change your boundaries with people if something stops being comfortable, or if something was never comfortable and you now finally have the courage to tell the person that it's not comfortable for you. Consent is tea. Personally, this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. It's so good, so well orchestrated, and though the scene focuses heavily on Blitz, I do like the underlying tone that Stolas still has a lot to answer for, which he will do later on in the season.
You never loved Mother, and you don't love me, you love him!
Mostly it's just great seeing Stolas being assertive in what he wants and what he doesn't want. And he's done doing all of the emotional labor in a relationship. Like, it's clear he knows that there's a reason why Blitz is here. But he isn't going to just give in and give Blitz what he wants, or read between the lines, which has gotten him into enough trouble already. Though he still has a hard time prioritizing his own needs, because he doesn't actually want to talk to Blitz, but he keeps doing it anyway. He's not getting anything out of this conversation, it's just making everything more complicated, but he still loves Blitz so much, he just can't not talk to him. He is clearly trying so hard to be angry at Blitz, but if Blitz just said one thing that was a little tiny bit affectionate, he would have gotten Stolas back in a heartbeat in this scene. And Stolas does try to help him a little in that direction, even if he is entirely smug about it. And clearly Stolas hasn't closed the door entirely on Blitz here, like he hasn't blocked his number or just texted him back a "don't ever contact me again, Blitz." And a part of me feels like he's sitting outside kind of on purpose. And he does have bodyguards and he doesn't call them. I also love that he refuses to acknowledge any wrongdoing in this scene because Blitz is focusing on the wrong thing in this argument. He just keeps going back to the well of "you're a royal and that makes you bad," which again harkens back to Stryker, whom Stolas brings up, because there's clearly still trauma here, which is not mitigated when he then learns that Blitz was fully aware of Stryker being after him. Which is such a hurtful revelation. Like, Blitz knew, and he didn't tell him. I heard that there are some people who are angry at Stolas for being upset about this fact because he could have just paid attention when Stella was ordering the hit on him at a dinner table. But the actual issue here is not that Blitz knew and Stolas didn't. It's that Blitz knew and he didn't tell him. And when they talked on the phone during the kidnapping, Blitz was completely indifferent to Stolas' plight because he thought he was too powerful to be in any real danger. Like, even if Stolas was aware that there were 100 assassins after him at any given time, the fact that Blitz knew and didn't tell him is a clear enough indication that he doesn't actually care about Stolas and his well-being. And this whole thing, along with Blitz's constant yelling, is enough to compel Stolas to go to the anti-Blitzo party, a little bit out of spite for Blitz, but mostly because he doesn't want to be alone. A direct consequence of Stolas' introvertedness and lack of social skills, which leaves him with no particular network, so he has no one to talk about his feelings with and process these issues. And naturally, this environment isn't the best place for Stolas because it's so focused on hating on Blitz, which doesn't align with Stolas' current feelings. And being surrounded by all of this Blitz hate definitely contributes to how Stolas comes to view their relationship, as he sings about,
"I don't think you meant to hurt me, 'cause I don't think it meant a thing at all."
So based on this whole party, it just appears that Blitz is this uncaring asshole who never cared for Stolas, just like he never cared for anyone else, which makes Stolas feel like a fool for having fallen in love with Blitz. And especially for still wanting Blitz despite everything and hoping that they could actually make a relationship if they just tried hard enough at it. It is really sweet because Stolas cannot see anything other than the best in Blitz. Even when he knows the worst, he still sees the best. And though the party is encouraging him to lay all of the blame on Blitz, he takes it all upon himself. He let everything happen. He missed every sign. And now he's painfully aware that he is just another person in a very long line that apparently keeps growing and growing and growing for Blitz. And based on Blitz's reaction to the party invitation, Stolas also knows that Blitz just has completely no regard for any of his exes and is completely unwilling to take responsibility, which Stolas would then also think applies to him. The unfortunate thing about the party is that no one really seems to care if anyone could have done something bad towards Blitz, like Stolas, for example. No one really questions how Blitz managed to pull a Goetia, and to a degree it makes sense because Verosica saw them at Aussies, and it would have been seen together both at Lululand and at the Harvest Moon Festival, and the IMP van would have been in front of Stolas' palace at least once a month, so to outsiders it would have looked as if they were dating. But because the party is focused on hating on Blitz, it means that no one there would really be interested in knowing if Stolas might have some feelings about what he did to Blitz. He might be encouraged to view the situation as if Blitz broke up his family and ruined his life. Also, no one really cares to check on Stolas after he finishes singing his song. He doesn't know anyone at this party and then he just gets drunk alone. It's actually lucky that Blitz shows up even if Stolas is angry at him, because then at least someone is paying attention to his well-being. Although Blitz immediately puts his foot in his mouth when he comments negatively on Stolas' drinking. Prior to that comment, Stolas was just protective of him, but then he becomes angry at Blitz, yet he is also conflicted because he wants someone to comfort him, so when he tips over and Blitz catches him, Stolas just gives in and lets Blitz hold him for a bit, until of course Blitz manages to mess up again. And is only made worse by the fact that Blitz can't really pick a lane in regards to apologizing. Like that morning he insisted that he could apologize to anyone but Stolas, and now he shows up at this party and tries to apologize after saying he wouldn't. Then he calls apology stupid, and then he turns around but now wants to apologize to Stolas specifically, but then he turns it into a pity party. Like, how could anyone ever love me? Which Stolas, being drunk and therefore excessively honest, just shuts down immediately.
There is a crowd full of people here who cared so much they throw an entire fucking party about hating you every year. Do you know how much you have to care to do something as stupid as that?
And he is right. And then Blitz tells Stolas that he deserves better and ultimately encourages him to go and dance when better shows up. And speaking of better, as in better than Blitz guy, I have a question for you, sir. How dare you? How dare you just come in here and make it impossible for me to hate you? In the 4 minutes this guy exists in this episode, he manages to give Stolas everything he ever wanted and what he actually needs. He comes up and pays him a genuine compliment and then asks him to dance and then kisses him. This whole sequence is really sweet and it makes me really happy for Stolas, even though I know I want him to be with Blitz. Because one thing I noticed is that in the entirety of the series, Blitz has never paid Stolas a compliment. He has actually known Stolas for probably a year at this point, and he is losing points to a guy who doesn't even have a name. Which I really appreciate about this episode. It's like the writers saying, don't worry about this guy, he is not important to the overall story. This was another moment where Blitz could have also so easily gotten Stolas back if he had just told him not to go and dance with this guy. Stolas actually looks to him for permission or advice, and Blitz lets him go. He gives him a look like he doesn't want him to go, but he doesn't tell him that he doesn't want him to go. And Stolas is still very drunk, so a look isn't gonna mean anything to him. I can't really decide if I want Stolas to sleep with this guy or not, because on the one hand, Stolas doesn't really have any other experience than with Blitz, because we don't really count Stella when Stolas is gay, and Blitz clearly has had a lot of experience, which reminds me of this thing I noticed in teen dramas, where usually when one character is to lose their virginity, they do so to another character who has already lost their virginity. So it would be nice for Stolas to get some other experience than just Blitz and help him to grow. But on the other hand, Stolas also clearly needs so much more than just to get laid. Otherwise, he might as well just continue sleeping with Blitz. There's also the part where some people question if Stolas is so drunk in this scene that he won't remember his conversation with Blitz. And if that's the case, then he probably wouldn't remember meeting this guy and sleeping with him, which would be kind of icky, so I definitely prefer that he remembers. But then of course that raises the question that if he remembers sleeping with Better Than Blitz guy, does he remember his conversation with Blitz? But then again, he only reacted to what Blitz said and he wasn't looking at him, so he doesn't have the context that the audience has. But I doubt that we're gonna see the immediate aftermath of the morning after apology tour, because with the shorts out, we know that Blitz's life has continued for at least a couple of days, so next time Stolas shows up in canon, some time will have passed since apology tour. The important thing to remember is that as far as Stolas is concerned, he and Blitz are technically over. Blitz actively encouraged him to move on, said he deserved better. And even if he doesn't remember that conversation, he remembers the fight they had earlier that day that ended with Blitz saying that he would never apologize to him. I'm not gonna lie, if Stolas wants to spend his time just sleeping around with a bunch of different guys, I say more power to him, even if it's definitely not the best thing for his mental health. Another thing I think is kind of noteworthy is how in the first season, Stolas seems really confident with himself in regards to his sexual relationship with Blitz.
We're rich and we're hot. People want our money and our bodies.
Oh, money maybe.
Speak for yourself, princess.
But then, maybe as a result of Aussies, he loses all confidence he has in himself, and he is genuinely surprised when Better Than Blitz guy comes up to him and wants to dance with him. And Blitz was technically also the first person who showed any interest in Stolas, so maybe that's why he fell so hard for Blitz, and why he was convinced that he'd never find anyone else if Blitz didn't want to be with him. Which is also just really sad when you consider that all he ever really wanted was to be with someone who loves him and wants to be with him. I know that a lot of people think that his monologue is him being unrealistic, basing his dreams of love and romance on romance stories, but I think he's being perfectly reasonable in what he wants from a partner. He wants someone who will be happy to be with him. It's sweet and simple. It's not really about the romantic gestures, it's just a good example that Stolas knows the meaning of media literacy, and we don't have to copy exactly what happens in the story because it's symbolism. Alright, so I think that about covers it for my analysis of Stolas. This has taken a very long time to record and I have a lot of material, so it's gonna take like forever to edit, but I am so happy. Stolas is my favorite character of this show, which is quite a feat because I kind of love all of the characters in their own way. I'm super excited to do the Blitz video, which I'm already kind of in the process of doing anyway. The thing I love most about Stolas is that he's the character who has the clearest development so far, and I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what direction they're taking him in. I'm fairly certain that this season is going to end with Stolas and Blitz officially together in some capacity. They are the kind of ship where we need to see them spend some time as an actual couple to buy that they end up together. And I feel like they complement each other perfectly so that you can see how both of them are gonna grow. I've heard some speculation that maybe they're gonna agree to be friends moving forward, but I kind of feel like that would be odd for these two. Like, they have a really good romantic and sexual chemistry, but I wouldn't say they have good friendship chemistry. Although Stolas really needs some friends, I hope he's gonna be friends with Verosika moving forward. But since the show has been confirmed that it will have 50 episodes, and there has been so much Stolitz in season 2, I think it's about time that they officially become canon. Otherwise there wasn't really a good reason to end their transactional relationship this soon. I also know that there are already people shipping Stolas with Basago, which I just really hope is not gonna become canon. If anyone watched my BoJack X Diane video, you know how I feel about the obstacle love interest. I don't think it would do any favors for the Stolitz ship, especially considering Basago has been said to be a very good boy. So would that mean that Stolitz would be in a relationship with a very good person and somehow be pining for Blitz? As much as I love this ship, I just really hope it goes beyond, oh, they're soulmates. Especially because Stolas is so open-hearted and willing to love that if he found someone good who was willing to love him, I don't see why he would want to be with Blitz over that person. I think if they were going to add an obstacle love interest to this ship, it should be on Blitz's end because that would be a lot more interesting. But anyway guys, I think I have to wrap this video up now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for staying with me all the way through. Please like, subscribe, comment on the video. I have some ideas for future videos, but I do need some inspiration, so if you have any suggestions at all, please leave them in the comments. Have a great day. Thank you. Goodbye.